When I first started watching The Boys, I thought Homelander was an absolute monster with superpowers. But as the story went on, that wasn't exactly what I saw. The more I watched the show, the more I realized he's way more complex than that. I mean, yes, Homelander is a terrible person. He's a narcissistic psychopath who led a whole plane full of people to die, forced an innocent girl to kill herself, and responsible for countless other deaths. And while doing all that, he somehow managed to trick everyone into thinking he's a hero. But beneath all that, he's also this lonely, pathetic man-child who's never known love. He's literally a lab rat, bred to be a weapon of violence. And that actually makes him more than just a monster. It makes him a character you can empathize with, even feel sorry for. Now, don't get me wrong, empathizing with Homelander doesn't mean excusing his actions. He's far from it. But seeing him for who he is, and understanding how he became such a terrifying monster, might help us understand what The Boys is really trying to tell us, and even give us insights into those pathological, real-life leaders who manipulate narratives to make themselves look like heroes. I mean, sure, I'll talk about all those in detail, but I think by the end of this video, you'll not only understand Homelander better, but you'll also find yourself questioning these so-called heroic leaders, how they manipulate us, and more importantly, the true nature of their ambitions. First things first, though, let's talk about Homelander. At first glance, Homelander looks like classic all-American superhero, powerful, virtuous, and devoted to his country. People love him and see him as a symbol of hope with all those godlike abilities he has. But when the cameras stop rolling and no one's watching, that's when the real Homelander comes out to play. Behind the scenes, he's nothing like the hero he makes himself out to be. He's actually a narcissistic psychopath who would use anyone and everyone to get what he wants, even if it means manipulating and killing them. And the show doesn't try to hide it. Right from the start, we see Homelander's public image is all an act, a carefully crafted performance to make himself look like he's the America's ultimate protector. Even at this point, Homelander's story reminds us a chilling truth: perception is everything. Because no matter how awful Homelander is, he still can be seen as a hero, all thanks to media manipulation and propaganda. And it isn't just something that happens in The Boys' fictional world either. It happened throughout history, and it's still happening today. Take Stalin, for example. He was a brutal dictator, but he used propaganda to create a cult of personality around himself and convince the Russian people that he is the only one to save them. Even Churchill did something similar. He used his influence over the media to downplay his role in the Bengal famine and twisted the narrative to protect his image as a war hero. In Homelander's case, we can see this most clearly after he left an entire plane full of innocent people to die. Just like those real-life leaders, he immediately used the media to cover it up and create a whole new story. He's already built himself up as a selfless hero through a massive PR campaign, so it wasn't hard for him to twist the narrative. He showed up at the crash site, fake tears streaming down his face. It was like an Oscar-worthy performance. His whole speech was about how devastated he was, but he also blamed the Congress for not allowing soups in the military, implying that if they had, he could have saved those people. And honestly, it was a brilliant move. Sick, but brilliant. Because by doing this, he not only saved his own reputation, but also pushed his own agenda. But Homelander wasn't just manipulating people for his own interests. He was also protecting Vought, the company that basically created the monster he is today. And I think his complex relationship with Vought is what makes Homelander's character so compelling. Because on top of his public image and the terrifying reality behind it, there's another layer to Homelander that makes him so relatable, so real. A broken part of him that was created by Vought. In later seasons of The Boys, we learn that Homelander was literally Vought's lab rat, raised in a cold, sterile environment without love and a normal childhood. His whole life was a series of experiments where he was exploited and emotionally abused. Even though he got some smiles and approval through the window of his lab, he never had the unconditional love every kid needs. Any bond he formed with his creators was twisted and conditional, based solely on how well he performed in their tests. Even Homelander himself admits that he often felt alone and scared as he learned to control his inhuman abilities, and compared it to drowning. So Homelander wasn't always that cold and heartless monster. He was just a kid once, often overwhelmed with fear, insecurity, and hopelessness, but no one taught him how to deal with them. He had to figure it all out on his own. And if you think about it, this kind of pattern is actually pretty common with a lot of powerful leaders and dictators in history. Again, take Stalin, for example. His childhood was a nightmare. His father was a drunk who beat him constantly, and he never felt any love, not even from his own mother. And Hitler, he was no different. His father was a domineering, abusive man while his mother tended to submit. I mean, of course, having those backgrounds doesn't excuse their horrible deeds, but it does actually show us that monsters aren't born, they're made. That also doesn't mean everyone who's experienced a difficult childhood will become a power-hungry, psychopathic dictator. But let's be real. We often see that these problematic, power-obsessed personalities develop in people who went through some serious trauma and hardship in their childhoods. Frank Herbert says, power attracts pathological personalities. Because people like Homelander or other real-life leaders seek power to fill the void created by their childhood traumas. They're extremely convinced of their own importance, because if they didn't believe that, they'd be basically consumed by their past trauma. But it's not enough for them to just believe it themselves. To confirm it, they need constant admiration and approval from others. And that's where the power comes in. It gives them the opportunity to endlessly attract that admiration they seek. But ironically, this insatiable pursuit is their biggest weakness. In Homelander's case, it's the most terrifying thing Vought ever did to him. Let me explain it this way. Vought intentionally screwed Homelander over from day one. Those traumas and the lack of love, it was all part of their plan. They practically raised him to be an immature, emotionally stunted man-child who is completely dependent on them and desperate for love, because that was the only way to control the most powerful superhuman the world has ever seen. By creating his heroic image that the American people adored, they gave him the one thing he craved more than anything, the love he never got. But this need is precisely what allows Vought to keep him under control. And that's also why he's so susceptible to people like Stillwell and Edgar, because they both know about that kryptonite. But the third season has already set up this idea that he won't care what people think anymore, and he's ready to go off the rails. Especially the mirror scene in episode 6 where his evil reflection basically told him that he's a pathetic crybaby who wants to be loved was a big turning point for him. This, along with the fact that he kills a protester and the crowd still cheers for him, makes him realize that his efforts to be loved are pointless because he can still get people's love even though he's a monster. It's already a disturbing idea even for a fiction, but the scary part is that it actually mirrors same disturbing real-world parallels. Of course, what Homelander did was something extreme even by historical standards. But similar atrocities happened in autocratic regimes in history, and it is still happening today. These so-called heroic leaders throw anyone who dare to criticize them into prison and even have them killed. But the tragic part is that they still can get cheered by the masses. Just like Homelander, they act horribly, yet present themselves as these selfless heroes. They exploit their power over the media to manipulate the public, polarize society, and create imaginary enemies. And they even claim that only they can save them, but sadly many fall for it. So in the end, people begin to see them as symbols of truth and justice, believing their actions are for the greater good. And the trailers for The Boys Season 4 have already shown that the story is actually going to that point. Especially Homelander's reaction to people accepting him for who he truly is, and even his son Ryan's subtle smile at violence was horrifying. But what's even more horrifying is that there are way more people ready to cheer for them, more than we might realize. And if we don't pay attention to what's happening around us, this fiction could become our reality. People like Homelander may have their own reasons for reaching that power, but the ones who paved the way for them to have it are actually the large masses that are open to manipulation. So us. But why are we so susceptible to manipulation? I know that's a tough question, and there's no easy answer. For now, the best thing we can do is being skeptical. Yes, it sounds cliched, but that's the truth. Because in an age where we are constantly exposed to propaganda and misinformation, finding the truth is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. And that's precisely why skepticism is our greatest weapon. We have to question everything we see and hear, and fact-check every piece of information. So basically, we need to use our own minds. But we also should never forget that no matter how charismatic they are, even the ones we think are heroes, they are just people. Just like us, they make mistakes. They are not all-knowing, and they even have their own demons. Isn't that what The Boys is trying to tell us anyway? In this world where there is no Superman or Spider-Man, who can really save us other than ourselves? So if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate if you could leave a comment, give a like, and click to subscribe. Your support will greatly help the mysterious algorithm notices me. And if you want to support me personally, you can join the channel by using the join button. See you next time.